What is the greatest comeback to an insult you've ever heard? Please consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. Context: John Oliver from HBO interviews Stephen Hawking. May he rest in peace. J.O. And there may be a universe where I am more intelligent than you? There may even be a universe where you are funny. I lost count of how many times I've seen that video and it still makes me laugh. The whole interview is just hilarious. Joe Pine interviewing Frank Zappa. Joe: I guess your long hair makes you a woman. FZ: I guess your wooden leg makes you a table. How does a dude named Pine have a wooden leg? What if it's mahogany or oak? How I didn't even think about that. Good stuff. Not even clever, but one of my favorite Zappa lines, because it's so outlandish, is "May Yura come to life and kiss you on the face. Nobody looks good with brown lipstick." Was that just Zappa's way of saying don't be a kiss ass? How I always loved that one. 2. A guy makes fun of his bald friend by rubbing his head and saying, "Wow, your head is as smooth as my wife's bottom." The friend also rubs his head and says, "Wow, you're right. That had to hurt." I asked my mother why she always wears makeup despite being in her 40s. She told me she wears makeup so she doesn't look like me. Savage. I used to work with this like 70-year-old woman. She was our supervisor, and one day one of the ladies who worked with us told this old lady to kiss my ass, and the old lady replied, "Where do I start? You're so fat your crack goes all the way up your back." Gran, how many times do we have to tell you? We are not a crematorium. Someone yelled out in a Walmart, "I'm not ashamed of who I am." Another voice echoed back, "That's your parents' job." During World War I, Switzerland had a tiny standing army, but they were very skilled marksmen. Wilhelm II of Germany asked what 250k Swiss troops would do if he decided to invade with 500k German troops. The Swiss said, "Shoot twice and go home." Switzerland is actually neutral now in part because they were such good fighters. Many European countries hired Swiss mercenaries to fight for them. At least, that's what I heard in a YouTube video. Yeah, but nowadays is just to avoid getting wrecked by any enemy Switzerland might face, since it is in the middle of Europe and with a very small army. Switzerland is also not worth taking. There's nothing there to justify losing hundreds of thousands of men in the Alpine passes to Swiss artillery and marksmen, even if you do take the country. Is Switzerland the country that has demos set up on all major entrances, exits and enough bomb shelters for the entire population? Yes. There used to be explosives in every bridge and tunnel in the mountains and close to the border, but not anymore. 18th century British radical politician John Wilkes was told in Parliament by a political opponent, "Sir, I do not know whether you will die on the gallows or of the pox." Wilkes shot back with, "That depends, my lord, on whether I embrace your lordship's principles or your mistress." Imagine hitting someone with such a burn that people are discussing it 250 years later. I was the one insulted, but not the one with the comeback. I was out with a co-worker and her friends, and my buddy and I were leaving a little too early for her sensibilities. She jokingly got up in my face and said, "Smell that? Smells like pussy." A guy playing at the pool table next to us stepped forward and said, "I'm sorry, that must be me. I just ate. It was amazing." Smoth. Goddamn. That man knew what he was doing. He was just waiting to use that line. My grandparents used to bicker. My grandmother generally came out on top, as she was firier. One time though, she was asking him to do a bunch of stuff, and he muttered, "If you'd lose some weight, you could do it yourself." She fixed her gaze on him and glowered. "I'm thinking of getting rid of about 200 pounds of useless fat immediately." He replied, "You're going to cut off your foot? Man, nobody bickers like old married couples bicker. They've had decades to perfect their craft. Also, they know practically everything about each other, including what will really hit home. Also, how to produce insults that are scathing in the eyes of others, but not actually damaging to each other. If they truly wanted to dig into each other, they would have figured out how to make each other want a divorce by now." Quiet guy in my art class got called queerbait. He replied with, "If I'm the bait then you're the catch of the day." My 10-year-old cousin was pushed aside by an older student at school who also felt the need to call him a gay child. My cousin told him not to get his hopes up. You wish became the kryptonite to gay jokes in my elementary school for a while growing up. Do your parents know you're gay? My first exposure to a trick question. Do yours? What are you looking at? I'm still trying to find out. When I used to say, what are you looking at? To my mum she used to say I don't know. The label fell off. I used to respond with good question. Fresh Prince had that one in the earlier seasons. Will is in a step-up class with younger kids. One of them looks at Will in disdain. So he asks, what are you looking at? And the kid replies, not much. Will rolling his face at the burn makes the scene. A friend of mine was getting itched at by these two identical twin girls in a class I had once. He replied with a troubling look on his face and said, if you two are identical, how come only one of you are hot? That dude played the long game as those two girls looked rather perplexed for the rest of the session. Fixed. I have something similar. Have a group text made up of 5 people. It's called 3 of my favorite people. When I only had one granddaughter I always told her she was my second favorite granddaughter. When the second one came along she told me now I'm third. Right. Sorry on this topic. If you want to incite chaos, go on a girl's Instagram and find a group photo of 3 or more. Then comment you two look great. Okay, Satan. That is evil. Just for your information the word you are looking for is incite. Saw a clip of a stand-up comedian the other day, and he says something along the lines of the first time I had X it was terrible. The first time I had X. And a woman chimes in with you mean yesterday? Crowd laughs for a while. And while the comedian is waiting for them to calm down you can see the gears turn in his head. Once it gets down to basically a few chuckles, he just says glad you remember and the crowd just lost their it. It was amazing. Okay, now we need the source of this clip. I've been called worse things by better people. For context, this was famously said by former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau when he found out Richard Nixon called him an aole. I didn't know that. That's awesome. My friend's mum said it when her son called her a rich. That son of a bitch. Not heard, but read. Easily the Spartans reply to Philip II of Macedon. As Philip II of Macedon was conquering Greek city-states left and right, Sparta was left alone. Philip had achieved a crushing victory, and Sparta was relatively weak and without walls. Philip sent a message to the Spartans saying if I invade Laconia you will be destroyed, never to rise again. The Spartans replied with one word, if. This is actually where the word laconic came from. Most ancient accounts make the Spartans sound like the masters of trash talk. The Persians also told them at one point their arrows would blot out the sun and a Spartan replied that it'd be nice to fight in the shade. Also, it's a long repeated response, but when they were told to lay down their arms their response was moln lave, which roughly translates to come and take them. The Spartans were a slogan making machine. Another famous one was Greek letter eta with tarnus tan, Greek letter eta with tarnus epitas, either with it or on it. It was said by a mother to her son when giving him his shield before going to battle. It means return home with it, or on it, dead. Dropping the shield was the ultimate act of cowardice. Rips aspis, shield dropper, was the worst thing that you could ever be, a combination of coward and traitor. The quote is not meant to be taken literally. Dropping your shield means being defeated, so it should be interpreted more like come back victorious or don't come back at all. It's not about the specific act of dropping the shield. It's about the ethos of the warrior. Win or die, there's no retreat, as evidenced by Leonidas and his men making a stand. They literally had no place to return to, they had to die. They sent message back home, saying tell the Spartans that we lie dead here tos kenanimasipathemini, faithful to their laws. As a side note, the Greek army still uses the slogans. One of the random generated missions you can get in AskReddit. Odyssey is a Spartan mother who basically says her son dropped his shield so go kill him. Whenever I get that mission, I'm like, hush, then I go kill the son and bring his dead body back to her. One of my coworkers was cold calling customers, trying to get appointments to drum up business. One of them told him to go frick his hand, And he responded with, "I've got that penciled in for 3. I should be done by 4 if you'd like to come in for an appointment then." The guy laughed his ass off and ended up coming in for the appointment. You sure do talk a lot for never saying anything. In Mexico, we use the word cantinflea for that. It comes from a comedian with a long career from the 30s to the 80s named Cantinflas, and that was his shtick. Talking too much, but never saying anything. Oh man, I remember watching lots of episodes of Cantinflas when I was younger. My parents introduced me, and I couldn't stop laughing. I haven't watched that show in 2 decades.